I hadn't intended to, but I'll begin my remarks by addressing his remarks, and I'll do something that I rarely do, and that is to quote a French historian, political scientist, and diplomat, and that is Alexis de Tocqueville, who stated, "The American Republic will endure until the day that Congress discovers that it can bribe the public with the public's own money." The previous administration was led by an individual who on the campaign trail said that $7 trillion in debt was unpatriotic. Now we sit at the precipice of $20 million in debt after 2 terms, and I would submit that perhaps that's unpatriotic multiplied by 3, or nearly that, and echo the sentiments of Mr. Schweikert that it is absolutely, positively unsustainable. Now, there are ways that we could certainly deal with runaway debt. One way would be to completely devalue the currency. If you really want to step away from the hyperbolic barbs that are thrown by my colleagues across the aisle as it relates to the motives for the legislation that we carry and find out who would really be harming seniors and children, it would be those who we continue to spend until the only way to cover the tab was to deflate the value of the very monies set aside to care for those least able to care for themselves. And so I thank Congressman Schweikert not only for his wise remarks, but also for reminding me just how much I miss being a member of the State House in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where there is actual back and forth debate on the merits of issues, wherein those small percentage of individuals who choose to inform themselves might shape their opinions based on a discourse rather than people standing at this microphone unchecked. Which leads me to my next point, which is also not on the subject that I had originally intended to address, and that is the statement of my distinguished colleague from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, who spoke on this floor about 45 minutes ago on a subject that's important not just to him and not just to me, but to America, and that is on the subject of asset forfeiture. His comments were indicative of the tone that this body has devolved into. One of the many who I admire, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who Vanity Fair described as a fervent Democrat who saw the value in working with Republicans, where is he today, once said, "You're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts." Mr. Raskin said the Trump administration was burdening Americans by virtue of an asset forfeiture policy, and he cited the case of a Chinese restaurant and an entrepreneur who he said had amassed $25,000 so that he could buy a building, but he was going over the speed limit, so he was pulled over by police. So without cause, they took his money, and it took him 7 years, according to my colleague, to recoup his money, and the opportunity was lost, and that's what's wrong with Mr. Trump's policy. Wow. And he implored listeners to please look up this case, so I did. In fact, there was a man who had saved money to purchase a Chinese restaurant who was going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, who was pulled over by law enforcement, who had not $25,000 but $75,000 forfeited. It took him not 7 years but 10 months to get it back, and it happened in 2014, and I'm not terribly sure who was president then, but I don't think it was Donald Trump. So I will join my colleague in suggesting that we need asset forfeiture review and reform in this country, but please, you're entitled to your own opinions. You're not entitled to your own facts. Now, why am I here tonight? Golly, Ned, why am I here at all? Who are we as a nation? I tell my children, if you want to know what's the right thing to do in life when you're confronted with tough challenges, when you have a dilemma, ask yourself, who do I want to be? Not who am I, who do I want to be? Because I hope I never reach my aspirational goals, but I keep trying as long as I'm here. I don't think if you reach all your goals for who you want to be, that you've aimed high enough. And if you ask yourself, who do I want to be, when you face that ethical or moral dilemma, you will always then come up with the right answer when you answer what the person you want to be would do. And so I grew up with a father who actually had a name for the belt that he wore around his waist. It was the Enforcer. I had a mother who thought I could do anything I wanted to do, and a father who would kick my tail if I didn't give it my best effort. I spent nearly 10 years as a prosecutor, and I can't tell you how many times I looked down the dais at the criminal defendant and thought, I wonder but there for the grace of God go I. But for the fact that I was blessed with amazing parents who encouraged me and loved me and disciplined me and told me the things I could do, unlike so many in political office today who garner votes and support by telling people what they can't do, what they need done for them. By gosh, this country was built on a government dependent upon people, not a people dependent upon government. And that's who we are. Now, who are we going to be? Where are we going? A wiser person than I once said, if you want to know where you're going, you should look where you've been. It's a relatively humbling thing to do representing the 5th District of Virginia, because the 5th District of Virginia was first represented in this institution by James Madison. I tell people those are some very small, big shoes to fill. Very small, big shoes to fill. James Madison won the congressional seat when he ran in an election against a pillar of American foreign policy named Monroe. They were so collegial during their campaign that they often traveled together. And when Madison was elected to Congress prior to the 17th Amendment, he went to the Virginia General Assembly, the longest-serving democratically elected legislative body on the planet Earth, and suggested that James Monroe should be the senator, and indeed he was made the senator. So we have Madison, we have Monroe. The drafter of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, lived in Virginia's 5th District. Of the power of the Article III branch of government, the Supreme Court, John Marshall, retired in Virginia's 5th District. Patrick Henry, retired in Virginia's 5th District. Lee and Grant sat at a table at Appomattox Courthouse and ended the American Civil War in the 5th District of Virginia, and a young woman named Barbara Johns stood up in the face of possible injury or death to start the Virginia Civil Rights Movement in the 5th District. So it's pretty humbling, but it gives me a good lesson in who we are. So many on my side of the aisle criticized President Obama when he said, you know, if you have a business, you didn't do that. Somebody else did that for you. I'll defend him. I'll defend him. You did it with blood and sweat and tears and hard work and persistence and the willingness to stand up time and again after failing. You did it, but you did it because you stood on the shoulders of giants who gave you the opportunity to do it. That imperfect people, Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner, who gave us near-perfect documents, James Madison, documents that have been revised, 27 times in hundreds of years, that we constantly should strive to be a more perfect union, that we will never achieve that status of a perfect union so long as institutions on earth are governed by mere mortal men, but that we have a duty in this nation to try to continue to. So that's why I'm here. I'm not here to perpetuate my own power. I understand that the most indispensable person is the person who recognizes that they are not indispensable. Folks, drive past the graveyard and look at the headstones, because I can promise you there's piles of folks buried there who thought the world just couldn't go on without them. And the band played on. The 5th District of Virginia was here before I got here. It'll be here after I leave. I'm not here to perpetuate my own name or my own legacy or any sort of power. I'm here to make sure that everything I do is pointed towards giving the posterity that will follow us, my children, Schweikert's children, and your children, every bit as good, if not better, opportunities than those which we had. I believe there are two fundamental entitlements to birth of Americanism. First, that you are entitled to an opportunity. We should always strive to make that opportunity more of an equal opportunity. But in a world where if your last name is Clinton or Trump or Obama or Bush, you probably have a better chance of getting into Harvard. We're not there yet. But everyone is entitled to an opportunity. And everyone within the Jeffersonian construct of liberty, that is, my freedom extends to the point where yours starts. So long as you don't harm another, you should be free to make decisions for yourself. Everyone is entitled to an opportunity. And everyone within the Jeffersonian construct of liberty, that is, my freedom extends to the point where yours starts. So long as you don't harm another, you should be free to make decisions for yourself. Has an entitlement to define success for themselves. If you want to be the world's best beekeeper, go be the world's best beekeeper. If you want to be a great stay-at-home dad, by golly, be a great stay-at-home dad. If you'd like to work to cure cancer, please do. If If you want to be a member of this body and try to perpetuate opportunity for our posterity, please do. If you want to be a member of this body and try to perpetuate your own power or your own legacy, please don't. And so this brings me to the point of why I stand here today. I've been here 6 months, not terribly long. Thank God I've been unable to shake my citizen worldview in favor of a legislator worldview. So as I walk into this chamber, as I stand next to these women and men on both sides of the aisle, I'm a little humbled. When I walk down the staircase on the edge of the original House chamber that's been worn by time by the footfalls of the likes of Kennedy and Madison and Monroe and Eisenhower and Lincoln, I'm humbled. But I would revert back to the words that Alexis observed over 150 years ago, and that is, we will thrive until we begin to attempt to bribe the taxpayers with their own money. And at some point, things become unsustainable. And at some point, we need to recognize that we are about freedom of individuals to venture and fail and venture and gain. And that we are a nation whose government should depend upon people, not whose people should depend upon government. An hour and a half ago, I stood on this very floor and I dropped at the clerk's desk HRES 458. House Resolution 458 is a vehicle that would move to discharge past the normal process and procedures. House Resolution 1436, H.R. 1436, is a bill that was voted for by every Republican member of this body in 2015, which would provide for a repeal of the broken promises that are the Affordable Care Act. Just yesterday in conference, they showed us polling, and it showed that the American people trusted Republicans more on national defense, border security, jobs, and the economy, but we were kind of sketchy on health care, right? I can read a poll. But I came here to do what I think is right. I came here to do what I said I would do. And this plan that I think could reasonably be called the Managed Health Care Bailout Program, the Health Insurance Industry Profit Enhancement Act, has failed working Americans. And the paradigm under which we have debated it has failed to be an honest one. If I'm here not to enhance myself or my legacy, if I'm here to do what I think is right or what I said I would do when I ran for office, then I need to stand up and do what I said I was going to do when I ran for office, and that was to ensure that the decisions of Americans were left to Americans, that we minimize the interference in individuals' lives by the government, and that we recognize, and I'll paraphrase, that Mr. Jefferson was correct when he said the fruits of the working class are safest when the legislature is not in session. I believe it was Will Rogers who said, they say the only certain things in life are death and taxes, only death doesn't get worse every time Congress meets. We hear about a CBO score that says X million people will lose coverage. Well, the last time I looked, this thing was called the Affordable Care Act, not the Affordable Coverage Act. And even if it were called the Affordable Coverage Act, it would be a misnomer because it's not affordable. A story published about 3 months ago indicated that 2/3 of Americans couldn't find $1,000 in case of a financial crisis. But deductibles have gone from $1,000 to $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 for the average family of four. And I ask you, if your deductible is $5,000 and you can't find $1,000 in times of crisis, do you have health care? You have coverage. You have coverage, but you don't have health care. You're still indigent. And it's a broken promise, but don't worry, there were lots more. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Turns out that wasn't true. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Turns out that wasn't true. We should see an average decrease of about $2,500 per year per policy. Turns out that wasn't true. Don't worry, these insurers who've supported the plan, remember the insurance industry endorsed the Affordable Care Act, they're doing this out of benevolence, folks. I have an article from the New York Post that says there's a cost spiral associated with Obamacare, with the insurance industry, but the cost spiral is upward. If you'd have bought $100 worth of United Healthcare the day the ACA passed and sold it the last time I looked, you'd have had $580. That's a heck of an investment. The only people making out on this are the big insurers. Meanwhile, rank-and-file Americans are perpetually lied to by folks who say, those guys don't care. Actually, we do. We're just not trying to perpetuate our own power by taking from one group and giving to another while bankrupting our nation and robbing our children blind. And so I've only been here for 6 months, and I went to some people very early on, and I said, how about discharging this bill? I'm frustrated. And they said, well, it's not time for that. And I said, okay, I want to be a team player. I'm frustrated, and we get to this point. The president's frustrated. The Senate's frustrated. I don't give a hoot and heck about the president or the Senate or this body. I care about the American people who I serve, and they're frustrated. And nobody on the other side of the aisle will talk about a plan that the namesake of the plan, President Barack Obama said, and I quote, has serious problems. That Minnesota Democrat Governor Mark Dayton said is bankrupting his state and is unsustainable. That President Bill Clinton said is the craziest thing. We have zero suggestions for help. Because, by gosh, we can score political points. Shame on you, on both sides of the aisle, if you're doing this to score political points. We ought to be doing this to make sure that the fundamental birthright of Americanism, opportunity, is perpetuated for perpetuity and that it doesn't die in the hands of a group of the political class who said, well, this will get me points at home. People told me not to do this. It might not help you. Your district's not that safe. I don't rightly care. I'm going to do the right thing. I've never had a job in my life that I wasn't willing to lose if it meant doing the right thing. So what are the goals of this? This is rather brash. They're humble. I want the leadership of this chamber to understand that the rank-and-file members support them, that we got their backs, we thank them for their best efforts, and we don't want to quit this fight. Thank you for what you do. Let's keep going and keep that darn promise. I got a feeling that if you keep your promise, if you're worried about elections, your reward will come when people realize there's somebody in this town that has some integrity. So I want to support leadership. I want to send the message to the other chamber that we're willing to act if they're willing to act and maybe embolden them. I want to let the president know that we hadn't quit on him. But most importantly, I want to send a message to the American people that some people in D.C. mean what they say. Whoa. There have been dozens of votes for repeal by members who knew that the repeal would never happen because it had to cross the desk of the person for whom the bill was named. Right? It was a theoretical abstract. Sure, I support it. We're playing with live ammunition, folks. Let's see who meant what they said. Come to this desk, and if you're watching at home, contact your member and tell them to come to this desk and sign on to the discharge petition, House Res 458. Or maybe you didn't mean it, or you did, or who knows, but, let us know. Shoot straight with folks. Dozens of votes for repeal. Let me be clear about this, too. I'm not sitting here trying to pull the rug out from under people. The bill that would be discharged by this resolution would not immediately end Obamacare. Instead, it would give us a 2-year window, And I'll bet you that if we repealed and had a 2-year window to debate a replacement, that we might get some input from people. I know to a metaphysical certainty that no side has a monopoly on good ideas. I'd love to have some input. There will certainly be members who say, well, I don't believe the federal government should have a large role. There will be other members who say we should have single payer. Right now, we are stuck in a broken system because of political gamesmanship. And it burned me when I was on the outside, and it burns me on the inside. What are the facts? What are the real facts? The average individual premium, according to eHealth on May 3rd, 2017, has gone up 39% in the last 2 years. The average family plan has gone up 49%. That means if you were an individual and your premium was $1,000 a month, it's now $1,330 or there roughly a month. I'm doing math on the fly in my head. If you're a family and you were paying $500 a month, then it's $740-ish a month. That's in 2 years. The average individual plan is up 147% from 2008. The average family plan is up 177%. Folks, Americans' income hasn't increased at that rate. The average is up 25% in the last year, and that's according to the Department of Health and Human Services report of October of 2016. That means if you were paying $2,000 a year ago, you're paying $2,500 now, 25% in 1 year. And candidly, all the disingenuous arguments on the other side about how many people will die if we move to a system that allows individuals choices are not only hollow and disingenuous and beneath the dignity of this body by virtue of their disingenuity, but also false. Folks, for the first time in nearly a generation, the mortality rate rose in 2015. U.S. life expectancy dropped from 2014 to 2015 for the first time since the 1990s. And ironically, it dropped more in states that expanded Medicaid. So I'm not only disgusted with and sick of such harsh rhetoric, but I think it's now been proven demonstrably false. We talk about who will be kicked off their plan. According to the CBO, 10 million people lost their employer plans. Those are the plans that if they liked, they could keep. And roughly 15 million of the people who are now insured are insured by virtue of an individual mandate. That is, that we have forcefully compelled American citizens to purchase a good or service at the risk of forfeiture of their money or their freedom. We live in a country where you can choose in many places to buy marijuana. You can choose to bungee jump. You can choose to skydive. Heck, in some places you can choose to visit a prostitute. But you can't choose a health care plan that doesn't carry coverage for mental health or for maternity. You can't do that. That's against the law. This is about choice. I served in the United States Army as a fire support officer, and when I left the Army, I made the egregious error of attending law school. Just kidding. And when I did that, I chose not to have health care because as I looked at what I was able to do on the limited amount of money that my family had and did a cost-benefit analysis and the fact that I was in relatively good shape and young, I determined my family's best interests were served by not spending that money. It was a crazy, brazen risk that I think paid off, but it certainly should be within the purview of the decisions Americans are allowed to make. And right now, it's not. I'm frustrated, but I'm fighting. A lot of people are frustrated, but they're fighting. I want to see our leadership succeed. I want to see this nation continue to be, unequivocally, the greatest experiment in freedom that the earth has ever known. But if we continue to try to parlay largesse in failed programs into political power, we won't. We won't. And the time to measure things based not on intentions but results is nigh. In Oregon, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars to create a website for the Obamacare exchange that failed to enroll a single individual, and nobody was fired and nobody went to prison. I was a prosecutor for a long time, and I'll tell you that if you waste or defraud people of $100, $200, $300 million, you usually either lose your job or go to prison. But if you're in politics in Oregon, you're rewarded because, by gosh, you had great intentions. Let's judge these things not by their intentions, but by their outcomes. Let's not argue about who has coverage, but who has access to affordable care. Let's support revision that drives down premiums and down deductibles. And let's trumpet our victories based on who we actually help, not who we intended to help. I stand united with the bulk of my colleagues. I know there are some who might have said one thing and now do another. This is an avenue by which we might find out who they are. But I don't for a moment question the individual motives of members. I think they have an opportunity to distinguish themselves by virtue of signing on to this resolution. I ask you again, if you're watching at home, to contact your member if you agree with what we said, and ask them if they'll come to this bar when we're in session and sign their name to House Resolution 458 and demonstrate that they're willing to do the exact same thing now when it counts that they did dozens and dozens of times under the previous administration when they knew that their actions would be met with a veto pen. And I don't do this to score political points, and I don't do this to make my name bigger, and I don't do this because it feels good. I do this because we owe it to the giants whose shoulders we stand upon, to Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson and Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln and Barbara Johns and John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan, the people who gave us the opportunities to be as successful and great as we are. Don't piddle it away. Don't piddle it away. Be responsible. Be willing to say no when no is the appropriate answer, and do what's right. Mr. Speaker, with that, I'd yield back my time, and I'd ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on the topic of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Members are reminded to address the remarks to the chair.